One of the key risks that we're still seeing in the manufacturing sector is around supply chain disruption. If we look at what manufacturing companies have focused on over the last several years, it's how can they be lean and low cost in their supply chains, whether it's single sourcing, strategic sourcing, offshoring, any myriad of things that have frankly left a very low inventory buffer, so that when you do have a disruption to that supply chain, it ends up having a very immediate effect. We see three things that companies really should be focused on moving forward. The first is that they should take a very wide view, a broad view of what their supply chain is and identify all of the relevant risks to that supply chain. That would include looking way upstream, so not just to your immediate suppliers. We found that more than 40% of the supply chain disruptions last year were not with your direct supplier. It was a supplier upstream. So really taking a look at the full end-to-end value chain. They should also look at concentrations. If you decide not to single source and you have a backup supplier, if they're in the same geographic region, that could still create a problem. So we think that step number one for companies is to take a very broad view of the supply chain and identify all the relevant risks. Second thing is around prioritizing. And it's very common to prioritize around significance and likelihood. So what's the impact to the business of that particular disruption? And what's the likelihood? The challenge with that is that it tends to de-emphasize the black swans, those that are high impact and low likelihood. So we recommend that companies consider three additional factors. One being velocity. So how quickly will this particular supply chain disruption impact the business? Second is around persistence, which is how long will this have an impact on the company should it persist? And then third is around response readiness. So how flexible is the company? How proactive are they about being able to respond once something occurs? And I think that will give a much different perspective when prioritizing what risk management strategies they should put in place. And that third step is around then developing risk management strategies for those relevant risks. And that could be around not single sourcing and maybe developing relationships with suppliers up the stream just to have an alternate source. It could be making a decision about maybe carrying a higher inventory level at a higher cost, but to have a little bit more of a buffer so that if there is a short-term disruption, you can weather through that. And looking at the concentration of where your suppliers are in order to mitigate those risks. It's not so much who's got the leanest supply chain, it's really who has the most robust and proactive supply chain that will be the competitive winner in the end.